Hey guys, welcome back. We have recently gotten a new selection back, and obviously this means the top 5 decks that you can use this month, but also at the start of the next month, obviously, until we get the next pack, and we might even have this meta that we see right here for a longer time if the contents of the next pack are as they seem to be. If you have not seen that, go check out the leak video. It's up in the right corner. But without further ado, let's hop right into the top 5 decks that you can use to reach Master 1 with if you want to achieve that. By the way, if you like my videos, please consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up and the notification bell. This helps me out a lot, and you also don't miss out on any new videos. So let's hop right in. Alright guys, I want to start with an honorable mention here. This is definitely not at the power level of the other decks, in my opinion, a bit under them, but I am pleasantly surprised as to how strong Salamangreat actually is. I played this deck before in its old variant where the play seemed to be like go Sunlight Wolf, go Counter Trap and then pass, which really didn't seem like much. But with this new version here, the interruptions are kind of strange with a board wipe, and then you also have this, okay, it's just a counter trap, but a counter trap and a board wipe, I guess, plus something else. So the interruptions, they don't seem that like, they are not like super hard interruptions, not like a Baron de Fleur and a Borrelord Savage Dragon together with, I don't know, an IP into Appaloosa into SP Little Knight, which I would call harder interruptions. This is a more softer one. They sometimes seem a bit weak, but then in the end they really get the job done. The deck is surprisingly consistent. You can fit in a lot of non-engine here, a lot of hand traps, and the deck still works. I would put in another Salamangreat of Fire if you had another one. Otherwise, Salamangreat of Fire and a Lady Debug seem to be the best normal summons. I would not go for the how are these guys called, the level 3 one, the Tokatomborg, and the other one, the Wind Monsters. Wouldn't go for them, but if you want to know how to play the deck, I also have a guide, Salamangreat guide. And yeah, as I already said, this deck is really fun. I really like this double link with its health mechanic here with the Raging Phoenix and the Pyro Phoenix, clearing the entire board with the Code of Soul. I'm really happy that they have added all the new support for this deck. It feels really good, and definitely a deck that you can take and go and reach Master 1 with quite easily, I have to say. But I also have to say that I think it is not at the power level of the other decks I will show you next, but a little honorable mention because I wanted to mention one of the decks that has been newly added, and even though the Memento deck is also not that bad, I think that Salamangreat is definitely the stronger one. And talking about the Horus cards, they are definitely strong by themselves, but don't really have a home and a deck where they absolutely shine, in my opinion. So I think from the new pack, Salamangreat is definitely the strongest one that you can build, and a lot of fun. So if you always wanted to go for that, go ahead. It's also not that expensive because you can firstly get the structure deck, take 2 of the structure decks, then you have 2 Silent Mining, you have 2 Sunlight Wolves and all the other basic super rare stuff here, and then you also will have to craft some ultra rares. But yeah, you can get away without having Salamangreats of Fire and only with the Lady Debugs. But I talked about this in the Salamangreat guide, so go check that out if you are interested in that. Okay, my personal number 5, and I think you could argue about this, is Purrely. You could also say Labyrinth if you wanted to. Labyrinth is also very versatile. You can fit in a lot of hand traps that are tailored to the format, tailored to whatever decks you are facing. If you face a lot of Branded, then you would put in Dimensional Mirrors. If you face a lot of Snake Eyes, you would put in Daruma Karma Cannon. But in my opinion, Purrely is really nice now at its new strong point with the new little black cat. It's quite consistent now that we can use the Sleepy Memories effectively. You also can fit in a lot of non-engine. This was always the case with Purrely, and the ability to fit in a lot of non-engine is always what makes the deck very strong, in my opinion. This deck is also a very unique boss monster that is unaffected, which we don't have any side decks, so we can't really put in a lot of tech options against stuff like this. Also, I don't see a lot of Purrely on the ladder right now, which means a lot of decks are not prepared for the deck. Though one thing to keep in mind is that if you are facing a lot of Snake Eyes deck, there is the potential possibility of them running Kurikara, though not everyone is running Kurikara, and a lot of decks are not running an Underworld Goddess at the moment because with the Fire decks, the extra deck is quite tight, so you don't want to fit in some stuff that you really don't need. And an Underworld Goddess, for example, you would only need for stuff like Purrely or maybe the Adignista stuff that nobody's really playing. So as long as this is not really on the radar of a lot of people, I think this is a very strong deck with a very nice going second kill option here. And this is my number 5. I would rank it a bit above Labyrinth, I have to say, but as I already said, you can definitely argue Purrely versus Labyrinth. I pick Purrely as my personal number 5. For my number 4, I have my old favorite one, Mathmech. Still unhit, still basically nothing has really changed here. This is an old list with still 3 Parallel Exceed, but having 2 Parallel Exceed doesn't really like hinder this deck. This is also, don't be confused here, going second version I had when going into a tournament here, so obviously adjust the list a bit if you want to play it. But we have triple Mathmech Circular still. We have 1 Diameter. This was the hit to Mathmech, but it doesn't really matter. You only need one that you can still get with your Salamangreat. This deck is super strong going first, has a really easy OTK line with the access code Talker going second, and at the moment there are not a lot of Bestials running around. We will see a Bestial deck here on the list, but I don't think this is a deck that you will face that often. For example, the Fire decks, they won't run any Bestials, so they can't really hurt you when it comes to this, and the Fire decks can definitely not play into a full Mathmech board with the Mathmech Super Factorial, the negates that you will get via your Prime Mathmech Laplacian, and then also the other stuff that you will normally have on the board, like the spell and trap negate here. So if you can establish the board, you will definitely, or your opponent, your Snake Eyes opponent, will definitely not go through. You can also play a fine amount of hand traps and other non-engine cards here that will give you the ability to stop or slow down the Fire decks enough to then go for the kill next turn. You don't need a lot of bodies. In fact, you only need 3 Mathmech Cyber's bodies to go into the access code Talker OTK line. It's a bit like the Fire OTK line, where you only also need 4 Fire bodies to go into the Raging Phoenix, the Atlantis combo. So definitely still a super strong deck, definitely a sleeper pick that not a lot of people are playing right now. This is also a big advantage because I don't think that everyone is accustomed to how the Mathmech combo works, so people might not know where to optimally stop this deck. That would be at the Prime Mathmech LM version here. Hitting this with an Imperm or an Effect Veiler is quite nice. Could also hit it with an Ash Blossom, but this is one of the key points at which you can interrupt your opponent, depending a bit on what you have seen before. So you might have seen some other stuff before where your opponent was already able to search, I don't know, the Super Factorial and maybe a Diameter. Then you don't really need to hit this guy because those are the key points here. And also Called by the Grave really very strong against this deck, giving you the ability to move the Diameter, which means that the Super Factorial won't go through, summoning 3 guys, and your Diameter or the opponent's Diameter will not be able to be an Omni Negate under the Prime Mathmech Laplacian. So whenever you see this guy can rip a card out of your hand, from your field Spell Trap and from your field Monster Zone, and then also if it is made with this guy here, it's an Omni Negate. So, and this is only one of the interruptions that Mathmech can place. So in my opinion, still a very strong solid deck, easy to play, easy to pick up, not the most expensive one, but also not super cheap, I have to say. It's really tough to get these Mathmech Circulars here because they are from a pack that's not that great, combined with Sky Striker cards. So if you can craft them, you should go ahead, and as long as they are at free, this deck is really super strong when they will hit this at 1, and I think this will happen at some time in the future. Then this deck will definitely be weaker, but Mathmech Circular, one of the most crazy and stupid cards to ever be released in this game, and as long as there is not a Bestial heavy meta, we don't have it at the moment, because Fire decks, why would you play a lot of Bestials against them? This deck is really, really strong. So I talked about a Bestial deck being in here, and this is branded Despia. You don't need to play this abomination of a 60 card version here, but this is really fun. I had so much fun playing this. I'm also playing the Puppet, going for a Puppet lock here, which if you can achieve that, that is crazy. This deck somehow, I don't know how, is very consistent in getting to the branded fusion. It's very good in breaking boards. You can see there are not a lot of hand traps in here for 60 cards, but you don't really need them. You have a lot of board breaking potential here with the thrusts, with the super polies, and this deck is really amazing, and somehow they always get a board together, they always get a strategy running, even though your hand might not seem so great. I have climbed with this last season and it was really a blast. This deck's engine is just so strong that even at Branded Fusion at 1, we have like the Branded Opening at 1, we have Alubo at 2, so a lot of hits to the entire Branded engine here, but this deck still works. It's incredible. This deck works in every format. In the TCG it's nice, in the OCG it's being played, and it's quite effective. As I already said, you don't need to go for the 60 card version, then you don't need grass and stuff. You can also go for a cleaner 40 card version, but in my opinion this is just super fun, milling everything to the grave with that grass looks greener, which I already said you don't really need to go for if you don't want to. I think this has a really nice matchup into the Fire decks, specifically Snake Eyes. The Puppet Glob, the Gaming Puppet, can be quite important because sometimes if your Snake Eyes opponent goes first and establishes a big board and you are able to break it, then sometimes you are in this situation that he has a lot of follow-up via his original Symphosploits or maybe his Flamberge Dragon, and then it's quite nice to have this gimmick Puppet Nightmare ready so that you can so normally you do this on your first turn to lock him, which is obviously super nice if you can achieve it, but you can also use this on the third turn, basically. So your opponent goes Snake Eyes first, builds the entire board, you go Brand Despia second, break the board, but he also has follow-up. They always have follow-up, basically. And then you give him a puppet on the third turn. If you're not aware what this card is doing, if you give this to your opponent cannot special summon for the turn. You can give this to your opponent via your Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, which this one can't be impermed and stuff. It's really hard to stop this. You would need to call by on the gimmick puppet to be able to stop this or other stuff, but there is not a lot. So yeah, this is really strong in breaking the opponent's fireboard and then also locking him out from coming back into the game. So yeah, Brand Despia is still a very amazing deck, as I already said. Go for the 40 card version if you want it to be a bit cheaper. This also works greatly and might even be a bit more consistent than is this, but this is just more fun. Okay, once again, an arguable place at my number 2 here. You could argue this could also be number 1. I don't know what it is with this deck. I don't enjoy playing it, unfortunately. I've crafted everything. Also, I have a third Hydrant, which sometimes you only play 2 right now. By the way, you don't need to play this specific version. You can also go for a more popular version. You can play Bonfires if you want to. But I think you will, or you want to play a little less engine so that you can fit in a few more hand traps. As you can see, we have 3, 6, 8 plus 3, we have 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. We have 18, which is definitely high. You could, if you want more consistency, go for Bonfires and then also add Poplars. You don't need to add Snake Eye Ashes here. This is also one of the decks, besides Memento, that really gets a boost from having a second SP Little Knight. So if you're not aware why this is really great in this deck, you have your Turbulence, which if this sets 4, this is like the power play of the deck here. Obviously, Turbulence can get impermanent or effect Veiled, but if you can establish an SP Little Knight first, which is not that hard because only needs 2 effect monsters, and then can set up the Turbulence, then the cool thing is that you can just dodge an infinite impermanence or an effect Veiler. So you have your SP Little Knight on the field and you go Turbulence, you want to use the effect, but then your opponent goes infinite impermanence or effect Veiler, then you chain your Little Knight, banishing the Turb and the Little Knight, and then the effect still goes through because it's no longer on the field, and then it will return in the end phase together with your Little Knight. But this is why you want to have 2 of these in the deck, because you obviously can also go for an IP Masquerena into Little Knight play, but you can't do it if your first Little Knight is already basically on the board and you've used it to protect your Turbulence. So this is why you sometimes want 2 in the deck here. This would be the optimal ratio, which I don't know, not a lot of decks are running 2 SP Little Knights, but if you want to play it optimally, I guess you would do it here. So this is definitely a more Rescue Ace focused version, a bit less Snake Eye stuff in here, though we are still playing the Diabellstar package with 1 Diabellstar less to have more hand traps in here to get to our Hydrant, which Hydrant gets to our Turbulence. Everything evolves around Turbulence. This is why I don't really like the deck. It's a bit linear to me, but very, very strong. Obviously, having access to your Rescue HQ to get all the spells and traps back into the deck and do it once again on the next turn. This is really effective, and I think a few things that make this deck really strong and arguably the number 1 spot, though I don't quite see it, but you can definitely make an argument for this, is that they are really great in playing under Max C. You basically only give your opponent 1 special summon. So for example, I don't know, let's say you go normal summon Hydrant and then you go search with your Hydrant for a Turbulence, and then your opponent goes Max C. Then you can just summon the Turbulence, you give him 1 draw, you set all your spells and traps, or you might already have an Emergency, which is the craziest card in the entire deck, in your hand, and then he goes Max C, and then you can, this would even be better, right? You add a Turbulence, and then you try to summon your Turbulence, or he Max C's you afterwards, and then you just go Emergency, summon the Turbulence for free, basically. Because let's imagine the situation: you have a Turbulence in hand, you activate this Turbulence, and then your opponent goes Max C, then you activate your Emergency, which is a free off, and then you special summon another Turbulence because you have 2, and then you tribute the one that you wanted to summon so that it will not longer be summoned. So your opponent, because the Turbulence was 1, the Maxi was 2, and the Emergency was chaining 3, your opponent won't even get one single card with his Maxi, and you will still set all of your interruption traps and spells. So I think this is one reason why this is so incredibly strong, but also because it's pretty hard to stop this deck. So if your opponent goes Rescue Ace Airlifter, you're like, okay, should I imperm this guy because this one searches the Emergency, but if he already has the Emergency, you can just dodge it, but he might also have a Turbulence in the hand, which I should keep my Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler for to imperm this guy here, but then he could go into a Little Knight protecting it. It's really not hard for this deck to get to its core play, which is very, very strong, and is most of the time with this Destruction, the Negate, and the Graveyard Interruption, most of the time is enough to slow down the opponent to a point where you can then on your next turn finish him. So really, really strong, really annoying deck. Unfortunately, I don't like it. I would wish that I would enjoy it more, but I don't. Yeah, but this is my number 2 spot to climb to Master 1 this season. And nobody is surprised about the first spot here. I play this with the Kashtira package. I definitely like this because before, I definitely have to say, you are feeling this Wanted and Snake Eyes Ash to 2-hit. This definitely felt less consistent. Doesn't really make sense because before we were missing the 3 bonfires and it still worked. But when I went back to this build basically without the... So you have to imagine that all the Kashtira stuff here, so the 4 Kashtira cards I'm playing here are basically hand traps or board breakers. And then I bricked quite often, so this is why I really like the Kashtira engine in here. This also gives you a lot of amazing plays. It's also very strong to have the Unicorn on the board. Unicorn against the Fire matchup can rip the Promethean Princess, which is normally a one-off in the extra deck, out of the extra deck. And this is really amazing because this then basically negates the one-turn kill from your opponent with the Zealantis and the Raging Phoenix. If you're not aware how this works, I've also made a video about this kill turn combo. You can find it. It's like the video that I posted on Sunday. But yeah, so the Unicorn very strong. This is also why I mentioned that the Fire decks don't have a lot of space in the extra deck, so you would definitely not put an Underworld Goddess against Purrely in here. Obviously, if you're always facing Purrely, you might, but you would definitely put, I don't know, a second Promethean Princess in here if you have space for this, right? So there is not really a lot of space for stuff like the Underworld Goddess, which is why Purrely is on my list here. But yeah, Snake Eyes, it's still Snake Eyes. What can I say? With the addition of the Kashtira stuff, I think it's quite consistent. It's very strong. The second turn kill with the Zealantis Raging Phoenix is so easily achievable. This is the easiest kill that I have ever seen. To be honest, this is it's so easy to get it. You have a lot of interruptions until you get to this point. You have a Flame Birch, which you can set something in the spell trap. You can make a Nightmare Phoenix if you have it in your extra deck to destroy something. There are a lot of things happening before you even end on this combo here, and it's very hard to interrupt this. You always have to keep in mind this normally happens on the 3rd turn, so your opponent has obviously also always invested some resources as well, so he might not have that many resources to stop you. It's really easy to achieve this. You have a lot of nice combo starters here that ends up on really, really strong boards. And one of the most important things, what makes this deck so strong in my opinion, is the fact that you basically always have follow-up. You, in most cases, have an original Sympho in your graveyard. Now, with only 2 Wanteds, it's more likely to have this in the graveyard because to get it out of the graveyard back on the bottom of your deck to draw a card, you will need to want it in the grave, and it's less likely to have this now with 2. So this might be in the graveyard more often, which means this is just put it back into the deck and just grab your starter again, and then this card is enough to go into the kill combo here and just put up a lot of damage that your opponent can't really deal with. So this deck does it all. It has a super strong going first place. It is nicely consistent. It has a lot of room for non-engine hand trap stuff like this. It has an amazing kill combo, and it basically always has follow-up with the original Sympho in the grave, which you can't even like Called By or something because this is a spell card, so Called By doesn't go hard against this follow-up stuff here. So yeah, it's just how it is. Snake Eyes, I don't know what they will do to this deck. Hopefully they add the Fire King stuff before they kill this deck. I'm not quite sure what they would do here. I guess they will limit these cards even more. We might see, I don't know, Diabellstar to 1 or Snake Eye Ash to 1 or Wanted to 1, Bonfire to 1. I don't know what happens, but keep in mind Bonfire is basically reinforcement of the army for Pyros, so I don't think this will stay at 3 forever, but we will see. This is my number 1 though, but let me know in the comments what you think of this list. Where do you think I put a summon decks wrong? Let me know what your personal number 5 to 1 would be. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for being here. As I already said, please consider subscribing if you like my content, and we will see each other in the next one.